Okay, so it's a couple minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. And first of all, just wanted to tell you a little bit about who we are. EEN is a national organization, but we do state work in Pennsylvania. And today, it's kind of we're talking all about different policy that we focus on in the state of Pennsylvania that is important to us. Um, First of all, to introduce myself, my name is Kim Anderson. I'm the Director of Member Mobilization, and I focus on outreach in the western half of Pennsylvania, and methane, as well as some other things. And Carolyn is our Associate Director of Pennsylvania Policy. She lives in or focuses on Eastern Pennsylvania outreach and policy and renewables. And then we've got a growing network of evangelicals throughout the state. It's wonderful to see some familiar faces on here. So I'll go ahead and get started talking about policy. First of all, many of you might be familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. It had a lot of tax credits and some wonderful things in it for clean energy, and some of that just got rolled back with the reconciliation bill. And that is something that we're continuing to advocate for on the federal level, but it also has some state implications. So I'm going to pass it over to Carolyn to talk about the implications on the state level.
Hello, everybody. My name is Carolyn Heckman, and thank you so much, Kim, for introducing me today. And it's a pleasure to be presenting to you today on about Pennsylvania policy. So some of these Inflation Reduction Act impacts essentially on us as a state. The biggest one that comes to mind right now is Solar for All, which is $156 million that will go to disenfranchised communities. This is kind of under attack. Last year in the budget, they did pass that it had to be given legislative approval. And because of this, we had a deadline of September 1st of this year. As of now, with the budget still hanging in limbo, there's a chance that we will be out of compliance and that we will lose Solar for All unless the budget is completed and they do make an amendment for Solar for All. This is also being handled by the PETA, which is the Pennsylvania Energy Develop Authority here in Pennsylvania. And that also is going to be sunsetting soon. So it's looking for restructure, which there are some bills being passed around. One of the biggest issues that happened with Solar for All this past spring was there was a bill floating in the House, but unfortunately, there was an amendment that was brought to the floor and was brought into the process that did attack net metering and subsidies, which then prolonged the process, did not bring the bill to the House floor for a vote, which is why it's now hanging in budget negotiations. As of now, Intel says that the Senate does not plan on coming back before September 1st, though we do hope that will change. Next slide, please. So another overlooming issue that's also been taking up a lot of media just this last week alone is the PJM interconnection queue and issues around it. PJM this past winter decided that it was going to increase capacity market pricing up to 900%, in which Shapiro did sue them back in January, which they did settle out. We're still seeing price increase, and here in Pennsylvania, it's about $15 on average each month increase. In places like New Jersey, it's even more at $25 a month average increase. However, PJM lacks total transparency. It's not transparent at all. And we know there are a lot of fossil fuel interests that are making a lot of these decisions. Just recently in the spring, FERC decided that they were going to allow a fast tracking of mostly natural gas projects. There have been issues with the queue, most of which in the queue is renewable projects that have been just delayed. It's not a very effective or efficient process. And due to this, we're now concerned that natural gas will get priority over the renewable projects that have already been waiting for quite some time. This is being felt in a multitude of issues that we'll cover as well in this presentation, but this is affecting every single electric distribution company like PECO and Penelec in the entire state of Pennsylvania, because as you can see from the map, this is a huge region. A lot of states are within PJM, and PJM is headquartered even here in Pennsylvania in Valley Forge area, King of Prussia area of Pennsylvania. So as we continue talking about some of the solutions, we need to think about this as a growing problem, because the settlement only actually settled this for 2 years and what we call stop the bleed. But we only have 2 years to truly figure out how we're going to make enough energy to be able to support all the people within this region. Next slide. So last year, we had a lot of conversation about the 2024 energy plan that Shapiro was sponsoring and kind of putting out. And these were last year only included 2 big policy bills. So the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standard, also known as PRESS, and then the Pennsylvania Climate Emissions Reduction Initiative, also known as PACER. PRESS is an update to the 2004 Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, also known as AEPS, which all the goals of which were met previously, and we'll cover that in a little bit. PACER also is a cap and invest similar to RGGI, but it is focused specifically on Pennsylvania, and there is a few difference in how those revenues will be spent. But now, because we love acronyms here in Pennsylvania, we have a lot more within the Lightning Plan, which is now the new energy plan. So this includes obviously PRESS with some more amendments to make it so that it's a little bit more friendly to nuclear and storage. But also we have PACER again. And we're also talking Act 129, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Program Reform, expanding community energy, which is the new way of talking about community solar, but it also includes things like geothermal and a test plan for some regional methane digesters. Also, it does revamp the 2022 Pennsylvania Economic Development for a Growing Economy, PA EDGE tax credit. This tax credit up until this point was actually never utilized. So they're hoping by including more in the tax credit that people will be able to take more advantage of it. And also creating what they call the RESET Board, the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sitting and Electric Transmission Board. So this is going to help permitting in the state to be able to get energy projects off the ground a little bit faster. So if you want to go ahead to the next slide. So let's start with the AEPS. So originally it was 18%, most of which was going to tier 2 and 10%, which would be your waste, coal, and energy efficiency, with 7.5% for tier 1, that's being your renewable side. The reason why it's called alternative here in Pennsylvania is because it includes things like waste coal, which are not renewable. But your renewable component is all going to be that tier 1. So we met these goals. And also we have these 0.5%, which is going to be your distributed generation, which is going to be in-state generation and production of renewable energy. So what do we do now that we've met these goals? Well, Shapiro campaigned on this, and he did meet his campaign promise of presenting a new policy to revamp the AEPS. So currently PRESS would be 50% alternative energy sources and split into 3 tiers. But the one we want to focus on the most is that tier 1, which now includes things like nuclear as well. So they're adding more. But also, once those 35% is met, say we have 40%, that other 5% would carry over in what they call a waterfall into tier 2, and then tier 2 into tier 3, hopefully dampening the tier 3, which is where your waste coal is now at. So it is a very in-depth policy. And as you can see, there's a lot of things that would qualify, but there's also some fun things like solar for schools, which we'll talk about a little bit later, would actually double count for tier 1 and tier 2 credits. So there's even things built in to incentivize, solar for schools and other policies that do have to deal with renewable generation. Next slide. So community solar is something we've been talking about for a long time. Multiple states have it. Multiple states are still fighting the good fight to try to get it. Community solar is a really beneficial tool for people who don't qualify for normal solar arrays. Say they're a renter or have an HOA. This would allow them to still get their energy from a community solar production without being able to actually, fund it on their own house or lands. Now it's being revamped to community energy. Same concept. It's based off previous House Bill 1842, which did pass the House last session, but then stalled in the Senate. So we're just taking what we already had that we know had bipartisan support and then advancing it to include things like geothermal and these methane digester tests as well. Next slide. So cap and invest programs have also been a hot topic just this past spring. RGGI did have its Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania did hear oral arguments for 4 of the cases, debating if it's a fee or a tax and if we're going to actually be able to implement RGGI here. This decision can happen any day, but we also have another option now on the table. So what is cap and invest? It is an incentive essentially for people to make sure that they are keeping their emissions in line. And if they go over that, they have to pay a fee. If they don't meet that, they can actually sell what their emissions goals are to other companies in a trade. So this actually incentivizes, keeping emissions low by putting a price to it. And also just this actually it was 2 years ago almost now, it's crazy to think, but there was a working group that Governor Josh Shapiro did put together that was made of interest from fossil fuels, industry, labor, as well as environmental groups, where they did find that reducing greenhouse gases emissions is both necessary and inevitable, and a cap and invest carbon regulation for the power sector that generates revenue to support the Commonwealth energy transition would be an optimal approach. And this leaves us with two current options, RGGI and PACER. Next slide. So similar to RGGI, you can kind of see here that there's PACER, and it really comes down to how those funds are going to be implemented. In RGGI, there is a bill for the RGGI Investments Act that would basically put the revenue into the frontline environmental justice communities more so than PACER would, because PACER would more so offer rebates in your taxes to whatever your energy is. So that's the main difference, but the way that everything's structured before that is very much the same, but PACER is definitely more Pennsylvania specific, while RGGI is multi-state, goes way farther, and we know it is a proven system that's already worked for a lot of states. Next slide. So just going a little bit more into detail with RGGI, this was actually passed in 2019 by executive order by Governor Wolf, but then was quickly met by an injunction when it was in effect in 2022. And since then, it's been stuck in the courts. Basically, the Commonwealth Court did rule against RGGI, saying that it was a tax versus a fee. But Governor Shapiro in November of 2023, if I'm getting this right, did repeal that decision based off the working group's decision. And since then, we've been kind of waiting, which again, this could be any day. I do see a question in the chat about how we measure CO2 emissions. We can take greenhouse gas inventories. So there are ways to do that, to be able to calculate not only current emissions, but past emissions and future projections based off rate of change. And if you want to go to the next slide. So we talked a lot about the things that need to be done, but I want to talk a little bit about, the wins that we have had. And the biggest one as of late still has been Solar for Schools, which was just signed in law not even a year ago in September of 2024. But as you can see, this was a very fundamental bill that brought everyone together, labor, Republicans, Democrats, and even just good paying residents who want to see our schools enhanced, see them save money for other things that they need, like teacher salaries and equipment and supplies. Now we're able to, upgrade not only their energy system, but also the actual infrastructure in the home or at the school to make it safer for kids to go there. No child should be studying with asbestos or have to worry about if they're going to be able to supply what they need to learn versus their energy bill. So this bill was signed into law. It was a group effort, and we're just so excited to see this continue, even though the IRA is under attack. We work with the great people, and Liz Fiedler, Representative Fiedler, is very good at what she does, and they planned ahead, and they do have some funds, but please keep up the study drumbeat if you know any good stories, and we'll share with you how you can take action here in a little bit. But this being one of them, if your school district does have a solar array or part of this program or just recently got granted, definitely uplift your voice. This is the time to really be loud about this. Next slide. So why do we do all this? Why are these policies so important to us as Christians? Well, it isn't just carbon, it isn't just methane. There's so many things that are coming out of fossil fuel pollution, like soot and ozone and other cancer causing things that can also cause asthma, allergies, ADHD, autism, and more than 37% of children suffer from these big four conditions. Back in 2024, we ranked 44th in state air quality in the country. And as you can see in the asthma capitals, we're still topping a lot just in the top 20, specifically Allentown holding on to that first place now for a few years. You can also see above, Philadelphia and Delaware County have both failed year-round particle pollution. I'm from Philadelphia, also had most of my adult life in Delaware County, Delco. The air quality there, it's not great. Marcus Hook is always extremely high in soot, especially when the wildfire smoke happened a few years ago. It was through the roof, even when the rest of the state was still extremely high. And even you can see from Pittsburgh, Newcastle, Wharton, PA, Ohio, West Virginia, they're the 19th worst city area for year-round particle pollution in the whole country as well. So things that we know, the oil and gas industry is the leading industrial source of methane pollution, which Kim will be talking about here shortly. And the closer people 65 and older lived to wells had an early death risk of 2.5%. Over 85%, and this number is actually probably way higher now, of published medical research shows serious health consequences up to 5 miles. And even just more recently, University of Pittsburgh even found it up to 10 miles away. But also living a half a mile and even closer to these is going to be even more catastrophic on our health. So now to tell us a little bit more about methane, I'm going to hand it over to Kim.
Wonderful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about methane and the impact that it has on the state of Pennsylvania. So if you're not familiar, methane has more than 80 times the warming power of carbon dioxide in the first 20 years. There's also toxic pollution that's released alongside methane that can make respiratory diseases like asthma more severe, more difficult to live with. And it's also linked with heart disease and other causes of early death. It can also increase the risk of cancer, cause damage to your immune system, and also have developmental problems. And proximity to wells is correlated with early death risk in those over the age of 65. So there's something called the oil and gas threat map, which basically living within a half mile of an oil and gas well or facility is correlated with additional negative health impacts. There are over 1.4, almost 1.5 million people in Pennsylvania that live within this threat radius, over 200,000 students, and around 175,000 people of color live within that threat radius. And if you're curious how close you live to one, you can use the QR code there, or go to, if you just Google oil gas threat map, it'll come up, and it'll like narrow it down to your county. You can look at how many, the statistics that I just mentioned, but based on county and things like that. So living near oil and gas does definitely have an impact on our health. And the oil and gas threat map focuses on the half mile, but there is research that shows that living as much as 5 to 10 miles away can also be correlated with negative health impacts as well. There's a lot of oil or methane that is wasted in our state. And not to go into too many details, but there enough was wasted in 2023 to power all of the homes in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh for 1 year. So that's a lot of gas that is wasted, and some of that can be captured using equipment that's available that isn't incredibly expensive. And then, we're kind of, you hear a lot about an energy crisis, and we're not going to have enough energy going forward. And if we were just able to capture that and power those homes in Pittsburgh and Philly, or the equivalent of that, at very little cost, think of the impact that that could have. Methane and carbon and other things also lead to higher temperatures. So the city of Pittsburgh has had since 1970 an increase in 15 days above normal temperatures, or hot summer days, which has a lot of health impacts that is associated with increased asthma attacks and various other health conditions. In Philadelphia, the number is about more than 20 days of increase in days that are above the normal temperatures in the summer. This has a huge impact on people that are pregnant, women that are pregnant. The average annual days above 85.1% has increased by 10 days, added by climate change. And this has a huge impact on pregnant women and their babies. So it increases their risk of preterm birth, stillbirth, and low birth weight, hypertension, and gestational diabetes, and maternal hospitalizations and mortality. And just as somebody who's had 2 children, these are things that you really worry about when you're pregnant. Stillbirth is kind of stillbirth, or having a miscarriage, or kind of your worst fears. And so, this has a real impact, and really contributes to the fear that pregnant mothers feel. On a state level, so in a couple of years ago, the EPA put out an updated methane rule that would capture some of this. The rule basically would make companies capture some of this, and then also check for leaks and things like that on a regular basis, and then had standards for how quickly those leaks needed to be filled, and things like that. And so then the next step is for the state to come up with a state implementation plan. And the state has actually come out with one and is doing a comment period on that right now. There is a very good chance that the methane rule is going to be rolled back at the federal level. So we're calling on the DEP to have to ensure that the plan that they come up with is going to be will stand up regardless of what happens on the federal level. And so if this is something that you're interested in engaging on, you can reach out to me first of all. So there's a open comment period that ends on July 30th, but anybody can write a letter that lives in the state of Pennsylvania and ask for the DEP to come up with a strong plan. This toolkit that we have created gives you, walks you through how to write a letter, and it has Bible verses and all kinds of various data and things like that in it. So if you're interested in that, you can look at that toolkit. You can write and submit a testimony before July 30th. And then you can also turn your testimony into a letter to the editor and submit it to your local paper. So if you're interested in doing that, first of all, we're going to put the toolkit in the chat, but also you can reach out to me. I'm willing to read your letter, help you turn it into a letter to the editor, and all of those various things. And so spreading the message, we've talked about a lot of different issues, and Carolyn and I are throughout the state, and as along with our advocates that we work with on a regular basis. And so these are some of the places that we've been seeing. On the top left there is in Philadelphia. Every year we have a conference, and so that's a picture from a recent conference. And then that group also gets together on a monthly basis. And then on the bottom left, there was a letter to the editor that I wrote about the tax credits, trying to defend those. In 2024, Carolyn went to the Pennsylvania Sustainable Agriculture Conference and tabled there. In the right, you've got Jessica and Carolyn at Messiah University. And so there's, these are just some of the places that we are out there. And if you have an event that you might be interested in having us attend or table at or things like that, feel free to reach out to one of us, and we will connect with you on that. Some ways to engage. So you can sign in an action alert. We're going to, in a minute, have one that you can sign that is on the federal level right now. You can write a letter to the editor or an op-ed, and we're always willing to help you with that. In your church or your neighborhood, you could start a book club or a small group. You could join a local hub or help us start a local hub. Like I said, we have one in Philadelphia. We're working in Pittsburgh to get something off the ground, and we've got people throughout the state that it just takes a couple of people to start something. And that's basically what happened in Philadelphia. Is we had one excited pastor who brought some friends, and that has grown and become wonderful. So if you are interested in doing that, let us know. And then also you can meet with your representatives, and Carolyn will talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes to take an action right now. So if you are interested in doing this, we'll give you a couple of minutes to do it. But so there's a QR code, and basically we're calling on Congress and the EPA to protect human health and the environment. There are a number of rules like the methane rule and others that are at danger of being pulled back. And we just want to ask Congress and the EPA to take our health into consideration. And so if you want to click on that QR code, basically it brings up a form where you can put in your name and your address and things like that. And it already has a language written for you. You can alter that if you like to. But I'm just going to give you about a minute to go ahead and do that. And if you don't have time to do it now, we can always share this information out for you later, and you can do it then as well. Okay, so hopefully that was enough time. And if it wasn't, again, we'll share out the links in the presentation, and then this will be recorded, so you could always go through and do this later as well. And so I'm going to pass it over to Carolyn now to talk about the summer ahead.
So thank you, Kim. So if you're interested in actually scheduling a constituent meeting with your policymakers, you can use the QR code on the screen currently. This will actually allow us to do more than even just that. We can, cue you in if there's a moment where your area is needed, your voice is needed for a specific issue. You can write an LT op-ed. We can send you action alerts. You can talk to others about creation care and just participate generally in state level advocacy. So please, if you haven't already, scan that QR code. It will take you to our C4 advocate partner, EEN Action. And that way we can actually just start going ahead and scheduling it with all your local and even federal, if you're interested, lawmakers. Next slide. So we will be publishing our recorded trainings. Again, you can go ahead and register for any of the other trainings using the QR code, but some of the trainings are already online, posted onto YouTube. So if you're interested in learning how to, communicate generally about creation care, talk about with your friends and family, LTs, op-eds, testifying, go ahead and look at that one video. But we also have videos on social media resources, as well as meeting with your policymakers, which I believe was with Jessica. So definitely tune into that if you haven't checked it out. She's wonderful and teaches a lot about how you can successfully go in and talk to your policymakers. And then lastly, or we have two more slides actually. So one more slide. Okay. And then, so again, QR code to take you to EEN Action. This is our advocacy partner, 501c4 of the Evangelical Environmental Network. So if you're interested in becoming more on the advocate on specific bills, go ahead and scan that QR code and get involved in our listserv for that. And then I will end us on a scripture today. So Psalm 42, verse 11, why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God.